Aloha mai kako, aloha. Thank you for coming this evening. Thank you for coming and welcome to the first that we know of, a public safety and counterterrorism forum. We are here to answer one question. Is Hawaii safe? We have 4 expert panelists from the F.B.I., the Homeland Security, HPD, and the U.S. Coast Guard to answer that question. But let me begin by first asking you the question. How many of you think Hawaii is safe? Let me see your hands. How many of you think Hawaii is safe? I mean, I would put my hand up because, hey, this is the most beautiful, remotest place in the world. Why would we not be safe? Well, when I had a tour of Homeland Security, TSA at the airport, there were some vulnerabilities that, wow, I didn't know that was going on. And I thought that was enough to start something like tonight to share with you what are all the things that are going on to keep you safe. Now, these gentlemen and these agencies have been doing this in their own individual silos, if you will, but we've never gone public, or they have never gone public like this, so this is really a special occasion for tonight to bring under one roof, if you will, these agencies and these individuals. Before I introduce them, I want you to be familiar with the handout, which says, what is the purpose that we're here for? And before we go to that, before I ask our slides to be changed, I want you to look at this slide here, because we're not only going to look at man-made terrorism, we're going to look at internet types of terrorism and even missile-based terrorism. And these, did you shut it off, Shannon? These actual live hits are what's going on in real time throughout the world. These are actual cyber missiles, if you will, internet, either to steal one's identity or to actually crash and stop your, as North Korea did to the GPS system in South Korea. So just so you know why that was up there and what it is, this is not just about anything to do with terrorism that we see in the Middle East, but this is going on every day. In fact, when we had the briefing with the Chief Technical Officer of the state of Hawaii, who I don't believe is here tonight, he said there's millions of these hitting Hawaii every day. Millions. And we know we've lost some identity through identity theft in a lot of our data banks. So just so you know that that is the case, now we're going to go to the next slide, and we're going to see, why are we here? As I said earlier, some of you think that, hey, it's kind of silly. What do you mean? Are we so remote that we can't be isolated and safe and have no worries about it? Well, it's because of that, as I said when I took a TSA briefing, that I realized there are some vulnerabilities that we are not aware of, and because we are so remote, we tend to be naive and take for granted that, hey, everything is okay. So it's in that vein that we want to look at our vulnerabilities and kind of educate ourselves, kind of a new mindset, if you will, about what's going on and what is going on not only in the world, but what's going on around us. From there, we're going to go to, I think, the next slide, where we've got the purpose, the welcome, and introductions. I wanted to introduce any elected officials that were here, but I didn't see the neighborhood board that is here. And we were going to have the director of public housing who said he was coming. Is anyone elected who I haven't acknowledged? Okay, I think I'll go from there to the next area of the type of terrorist threat. And basically the agenda is going to be as it goes. We're going to go looking at some of the threats. We're going to look at a video. We're going to have the agency presentation. And then, if you'll just bear with us, we'll have the Q&A and the discussion at the end. And we hope to have a lot of that, because we know that you have a lot of questions about what are these things that are said, what do they mean, what about other areas that may have not been covered. So let's go to the types of terrorism, which I basically gave a quick overview of. Some of the things that are at the global level, none of you need to really know too much about, because that's what we see every day. We see national threats, we see local threats, we see cyber threats, and at the end, I'm going to show you something about nuclear threats, because this is where Hawaii really is vulnerable, and where the Missile Defense Alliance that just visited through President Kochi of the State Senate just paid us a visit and gave us an update on what's going on in North Korea. And we have a statement by a general that says we are now in the range of their missiles, and their missiles likely have nuclear heads on them. So if there's anything that's overshadowing, it's even the last one, not the Middle Eastern threat. So from there, let's go to what is kind of an overview of where we're going to be vis-a-vis a video. I think that's going to be the next, oh, sorry. We are going to give you the topics that we're going to be talking about, because we have the origin and the evolution. We have Ryan, who's going to be here. Do we have the lays for Ryan? Ryan Noonan, welcome to the Terrorism Forum, and for your presentation, you get a lay from my staff, Rachel. Let's give him a round of applause for Ryan. Thank you, Ryan. Ryan will kick off with the origin and evolution of terrorism, and then following that will be Lieutenant JG Nicholas Spence of the U.S. Coast Guard on potential threats to Hawaiian waters and ports. So could we have a lay for the Lieutenant JG, who you notice is in uniform, and he looks like he's doing his job very well, even after hours. From there, identifying threats to your safety in public and workplace settings, Darrick White, TSA Homeland Security. Darrick, welcome again. Thank you for the tour that you gave me and the other people. Darrick gave us the wake-up call when a few of legislators toured the TSA, and a lot of the things that they're doing and a lot of the things that we know that we should be sharing with you. And last but not least, surviving an active shooter in a soft target area, Sergeant Kevin Kadooka from HPD. Thank you, Sergeant. And those of you who know, this is the Hahioni Elementary School where we have the neighborhood board, and HPD gives a report every last Tuesday of the month. So HPD is always a friend of the neighborhood. So from there, let's go into what is an overview, which we have put together as a touch of what sort of terrorism and a video version of that will look like. And then we're going to get right to Ryan and the presentation on the origins of that. Let's just take a look at the video here.
Many vividly remember the worst mass shooting in state history. It happened just 13 years ago when a disgruntled employee of Xerox went to work, gunned down, and killed 7 people before finally surrendering to police.
Byron Uesugi went on a shooting rampage that morning. Duke spoke to a man who dialed 911 and was panicking near the gruesome scene.
And the phone call that I received was the one man who'd left the room with his buddies to go get a cup of coffee when the shooter came in and blew his friends away.
This frightening attack and others like it are happening more and more, raising questions about our security in public places or the lack thereof.
In Aurora, Colorado, a similar horrifying scenario in 2012.
We have to be proactive. You can't just stay watch what's happening without taking proactive measures.
Trying to determine where are the crown jewels of the operation. When are we going to be less detected? Is there a certain time of day?
We vreesden een terroristische aanval en dat is gebeurd. Hebben terroristen.
This is insane. This is, well, it's like a war zone.
We do have to worry that this is a new methodology and certainly potentially facing a new war on terror. It's hard to defend all soft targets, civilian targets where people will congregate, especially on a weekend evening or for a sports or entertainment venue.
Their most urgent concerns in that new bulletin to police across the country, that homegrown radicals inspired or directed by Syria-based operatives could seek to replicate the effects of the Paris attacks using similar weapons and tactics, although on a smaller scale.
What amounted to an active shooter situation There was a massive law enforcement response.
We have an increased law enforcement presence at all the high-profile areas, including hospitals. We've been in contact with the school district.
A soft target is a place where people are gathered, such as an airport, a train terminal, or even a stadium, where before they can get through screening, they're essentially unprotected. They are prime targets for terrorists.
So-called soft targets, trains, airports across the country, and at malls as well. Warning attackers could, quote, replicate Paris using similar weapons and tactics.
That is an overview of some of the things we're looking at tonight, the active shooter. How many remember the Xerox at the warehouse area? Remember that, 1999? What a tragedy. Seeing that and then seeing that there are other areas that are going on throughout the world, and then seeing actually the cyber and then even the missile crisis. So to start us out, Ryan, you're going to tell us all we ever wanted to know about what's going on in the world of the FBI. So let's welcome Ryan from the FBI. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thanks, Representative Ward. I appreciate the opportunity to come out and speak with you all tonight. It's tough to open up a forum like this, but I'll do my best. The first thing I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, because I feel like I at least owe it to you so you know who you're listening to. But I'm the supervisory special agent of the Joint Terrorism Task Force here in Hawaii that is the primary counterterrorism force in the state. I grew up in upstate New York, really, really far from Hawaii. A small town guy, and went to college in Virginia and started out my career, got a chemistry degree and started out my career kind of in business and doing computer programming, that kind of thing, back right out of college. And then got into the FBI. And since then, the last 12 years, I've been doing counterterrorism essentially full-time. That's the only thing I've ever done for the FBI. Started out in the New York office back in 2004, where I did criminal work and CT work together, kind of working CT threats using criminal statutes, that kind of thing, in New York City. And then was promoted to weapons of mass destruction director. We just saw a nuclear missile, but what we did was kind of train foreign law enforcement and other local law enforcement partners on dealing with weapons of mass destruction threat, whether that be bio, chem, that kind of thing. I stepped down from there, went to the Washington field office where I worked mostly extraterritorial threats. So all my subjects lived in Pakistan and Afghanistan mostly. Spent a great deal of time in that few years in Afghanistan and Pakistan in 2011 and 2012, working for the FBI at the embassy. And then ended up working local threats in D.C. coming out of the Horn of Africa, more Somali and al-Shabaab folks. Which brings me here. I got an Office of Preference transfer out to Hawaii approximately last January. I've been here probably more than most East Coast people, but I don't have any connection to Hawaii familially. People ask me that. But I always loved it here, and I had a small child, and I thought, what better place to raise a kid than Hawaii? And I was right. So I've totally fell in love with it here, and I've made this my home, and I'm happy to be here serving you guys. So then after getting this preference to transfer, I actually took my boss's job, who's a well-known guy who'd been doing this for 7 years before me, Ed Ignacio, who kind of set the tone for the JTTF. So I took over some pretty big shoes, and I've been trying to take some of my previous experiences here and bring it to Hawaii and apply them here. But the reason Rep. Ward asked, when I thought about what I was going to say tonight, what I really wanted to talk more about was ISIS and the evolution of the terrorism threat as we've seen it over the last couple of years, because I think it is significant and it speaks to the flyer and all the stuff that's been in the video. So in January 2014, President Obama kind of referred to ISIS as junior varsity. It's well documented, and now I think we think of them more as Al-Qaeda 2.0, right? I mean, they are a very, very robust threat. It's something that we focus on all the time. Both ISIS and Al-Qaeda seek to form a caliphate, meaning they want to have an area that is ruled by Sharia law. But unlike unlike Al-Qaeda, ISIS has shown us a different kind of threat than we saw with our Al-Qaeda stuff that I was doing back in the late 2000s. So what I think I want to impart to you guys today is, how is this threat different than the one we saw previously? How is the FBI addressing this threat both nationally and here in Hawaii? And then what does it mean to you guys, to the community? What do we, and how do we interact with you, and how can you help us in this fight? So that's what I hope to get across by the end of this. So I told you at the beginning, I've worked a lot of years in more traditional sites for terrorism, like New York City, Washington field office, spent a few Christmases in Afghanistan and Pakistan in that period of time where terrorism was rampant. And you remember in those times when we had terrorism investigations, mostly, luckily, that have been disrupted by the FBI, like Najib al-Azazi or Faisal Shahzad, the Times Square bomber. Most of those threats were disrupted because there was a connection, a very personal connection with people overseas. Whether they were going to training camps, they were getting financial assistance from those places. There was a lot of opportunities for people who were in our line of work to kind of intervene and see what those people were doing. What ISIS has been doing recently is really blurred the lines between a directed attack, an inspired attack, a homegrown extremist, a lone wolf, that kind of thing. It's no longer looking for the people who were in contact with these folks. It's looking for another kind of person, someone here. These individuals we collectively call homegrown violent extremists. They've been self-trained through poisonous information available on the internet. And when ISIS gets a hold of someone like this, it's much less important to them why they're going to do what they're going to do than just that they're willing to do it. So we've seen in a number of locations around the United States that are not unlike Hawaii. That I'm going to go over a couple examples here where they've actually had people who are radicalized in small, non-traditional communities who were willing to go out and do things on their behalf. So, for instance, we had in Topeka, Kansas, we had an individual named John Booker who was arrested back in April 2015 after he believed he had put a car bomb inside of a place, who had been doing it on behalf of ISIL. We have another one in Harrisburg, Joint Terrorism Task Force individual, Amir Aziz, who in late December was conspiring to provide material support in the form of himself and others to fly to Turkey for the purposes of learning about ISIS or fighting on behalf of ISIS. And all these people are USPers, so that means they can come back here should that fighting end, and they bring all that knowledge and stuff with them. And in Jackson, we had another one who believed that he was also providing material support and going to Turkey. So if these kinds of things can happen in Topeka and Jackson and Harrisburg, it absolutely can happen in Hawaii. It's no longer a place where, when I came into the FBI, where we were looking for a particular location, residence with numerous people who in Brooklyn who just came in from someplace who had connectivity someplace else. We're looking for people who are disillusioned, who go to their basements, they get on the internet, and they're willing to do something that, based on the idea that it'll make them further their agenda, either because they're not happy with themselves or whatever. But there's plenty of people out there who are willing to push them to do things that they hadn't done before. So that is to say, like, what is the FBI doing about this new threat? Well, it shouldn't come as any surprise to you that counterterrorism remains the FBI's #1 priority. It has been since 9/11. We've been working long and hard in those years since then, trying to make sure that we have a handle on everything having to do with terrorism. Now, things have changed a little bit. So when it comes to the social media threat, which you'll see a lot of propaganda and social media coming out, you've heard many different news stories that have come out about ISIS doing this or doing that, putting these things out. We have our headquarters is working to identify those actors and push that information out to the field, and that would come to us if we found somebody in Hawaii who was becoming radicalized or was talking to somebody who was actively trying to hurt the United States. And they would work closely with our foreign partners and other law enforcement to try and vet that out. But what I want to be specific about in this community, the things remain largely the same with what the FBI does in general. And we have a wide range of tools, from what you see in the movies or what you might imagine that the FBI does, all the way down to sending someone out to have a rather mundane conversation about what another person identified or reported. Not everything, it's not one size fits all. So how we do that is I manage something called the Joint Terrorism Task Force, which we're going to put that up here in a minute. So the Joint Terrorism Task Force its sole job is to mitigate these threats. It's a full-time group, and their job is to work these threats, whether they're completely adjudicated by and investigated strictly within the confines of our office, or if it requires us to work with the intelligence community, foreign law enforcement partners, or others. The JTTF construct was created back in 1983, and it was created in New York City, and there were very few initially, and now there's over 100 of them, and every field office has one, and some have more than one, large metropolitan areas specifically. So it creates this group of people that has a combination of authorities and capabilities so that we can quickly react to the threats that are produced, whether they be at the airport or be at the ports or be anywhere, HPD, that kind of thing. It ensures that there's constant information sharing among these folks. They are constantly working together with one another. We'll talk about that in a minute. And to make sure that we're not meeting for the first time when we see that there's some kind of terrorism issue. At its core, it includes a group of FBI agents that I personally manage. It also includes a group of full-time task force officers from agencies that are fully invested, people who sit in my space over in Kapolei, that are basically seconded from their group, from their agency or department over to the FBI, and then they work the terrorism threat. That's the group of folks that we have here. And you'll notice we have people from all the different islands. I regularly talk to the police chiefs, customs, attorney's office, the Marshal Service, immigration, NCIS, basically everybody that you could imagine we have on there that is working for us on a daily basis to adjudicate these things. Then, on top of that, the next slide you'll see is we've got a much larger group that meets bi-weekly that is our JTTF Pacific, and they are our partner organizations, including the Aloha State Fusion Cell, who I see Fusion Center, who's out here today, where we all get together in a much larger forum so that we can include other folks from our military community and all the other agencies here and kind of talk on a bi-weekly basis about everything that's being seen in Hawaii that's been reported to the various agencies. We look for trends and any threats that occur and that kind of thing. So these relationships are built at these meetings and any of the associated meetings that we have, and ensure that we're prepared and can respond to whatever comes, big or small. And I should mention that the way the FBI this is a totally scalable process. So should we have a threat that outsurges the amount of resources that I have under me on the JTTF, Mr. Delacourt, who's our special agent in charge here, has made it entirely clear that the entire office is the JTTF. The FBI is counterterrorism. If we need it, we have the resources to include everything within the state and anything that we need from back in Washington, which we can provide. Now, some of you guys who've listened very intently to this will say, well, hey, Brussels and Paris, well, those weren't troubled souls who found this on the internet and decided they were going to do that. This was a more traditional threat where you had actually organized people coming from overseas to conduct attacks, and that's 100% true. And the FBI still does that too. We certainly haven't stopped doing what we used to do. It's just an added layer that now we have to deal with folks who are radicalized so quickly based about social media. We also have our traditional threat, which ISIS has grown into nicely in the attacks that we had happen very recently. So, we're still working those on an everyday basis. So, what does that mean to Hawaii Kai, and what does it mean to Hawaii in general? So, first, we need the assistance of communities like your own to identify these threats in our state. It's great that there's people 6,000 miles away in Washington who are looking out for us, and they have a very good set of skills, and they try and keep us safe. But the people here who recognize issues among their friends, neighbors, family members, coworkers, I mean, you guys are really the main observers and the power of your own community, which I think is what Rep. Ward is saying here. The good news is, in the short year that I've been here, I've found the people of Hawaii to be very engaged and highly aware of their environment. So we've not been short on quality observations that have come into us and been handled. So the next slide I'm going to show you, the last slide that I'm going to show you is, two contact numbers. The first number, that's my number. Like I said, I'm the supervisor of this group that's supposedly doing that, so that's my office number. And the second office, and I'm not there 24 hours a day. The second number, that's the FBI office. We also have, you can go to fbi.gov and find other ways to reach the FBI. But that's the office all the way over there in Kapolei where we are now. And somebody's there answers the phone all the time. So if you have something that I should say that one of the things I like to say when I put up a number is, if you're bleeding or someone's chasing you, call my colleague over there at HPD, okay? Like, don't leave a message on my phone saying, hey, help me, FBI. That's not gonna help. You call the HPD. But if you've identified something where you're like, hey, this is a little bit odd, this is a little bit concerning about something that I observed today, I don't exactly know what I have here, but it makes me concerned. A lot of times that's the difference between catching something and not catching something. And I'm sure we can talk more about, see something, say something, that kind of thing, but, be specific. So if you think that you've seen something or you have some observation, be specific with it. Not, hey, that guy didn't look quite right. Like, it's very difficult for us to do anything with that, or there was a guy at the stoplight 3 hours ago over in Waikiki, and he looked at me and ran away. Like, there's not much I can do. So, make sure you're giving us, I think this was weird because of this, this, and this. And then we'll take it from there. That's our job, is to determine, to mitigate these threats. That's all I do. One thing that, Rep. Ward said was, are we sitting here in the Pacific Ocean and we feel like we're safe from terrorism? Like, I never, ever feel that way. I mean, my sole job is to get up every day and not think that. So that's what I do. And I handle everything that comes to my office. So the last thing I want to say is something that that I think is important in this time, and it's something that came from our big boss, Director Comey, who kind of sent this out to us at Christmas time when we were going through a lot of those terrorism things, and I thought it was really good. And he said a lot of people were asking him for advice on how do I live in this world where crazy people are shooting up their workplaces, or France is, people are blowing up people they've never heard of before. I mean, I feel very concerned about this. And he said that his message was very clear, and that in life you can live in kind of 4 states, right? You can live in red, which is like you're in a fight for your life right now, and we'll learn a little about that from Kevin. For an active shooter type thing, something's happening right now, and it's fight or flight, and something really bad's happening to me. Orange is I'm on the cusp of that fight for my life, and in those states you're amped up, you're stressed out to the max, you're nervous. You can't live in those states. Like, those are not the appropriate place to live. On the other end of the spectrum is white, right? White is you're listening to your iPod, you're walking around in a dark parking lot, you have no earthly idea what's happening around you. You're standing on a subway platform or the new train, and you're just kind of like not paying any attention to the group of people that's amassing and looking at you. That's not a good place to live either, because you're putting yourself out there kind of as a target. So the director said, you need to be in a state of yellow, right? So you want to be constantly aware of your surroundings. You don't want to keep you from living your life, but you want to be kind of aware of where you're going to be. So that's what I would recommend. That's what the director recommended that I tell my family, and that's what I'll tell my new Hawaii Kai family here in in this district. But I want to leave you with, I manage a group of intelligence and law enforcement professionals who spend a lot of time away from their families to do exactly what you hope that they're going to do, which is try and make sure that we are mitigating any threats that come into Hawaii. You guys literally pay us to protect you in that way. So we're happy and honored to have the opportunity to do that. I love my job. I love the FBI, and I love Hawaii. So that's what I want to impart with you guys is it's a scary time, and it is a time to make observations, and it is time to lean on the FBI and the people on this panel. But you can't let these people get what they want, which is to have you live in this constant state of fear. So live in that state of yellow, report the FBI when you feel like you need to, and just know that we're there trying to every day to make sure that nothing happens here in Hawaii. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Noonan and the FBI. There's one takeaway already. Yellow is best. Okay, from the FBI, we're going to go to the Coast Guard. We're going to take a look at the ports, the sea, and the general state of the art of what Lieutenant JG, Mr. Nicholas Spence, is going to tell us. So, Nicholas, will you take it? Let's give him a welcome.
So, aloha, everyone. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Representative Ward, for allowing the Coast Guard to speak tonight. Obviously, I'm going to speak about the waters. Obviously, our state is surrounded by water, so how are we safe from that waterborne threat? So I don't have any slides to present. There is a handout that got put out if you can look and kind of go over what's on there. So on one side, we're going to go over the MARSEC levels, which is security levels that we go through, which is how it works out with the National Terrorism Advisors system, and then our contact numbers. So that's what I'm going to go over during my presentation. First, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Lieutenant Nicholas Spence. I currently work down in Sand Island, down in the port of Honolulu. I've been there for about 2 years. I work in the dispatch. It's kind of what we call it's a command center. But any calls that come in that have to do with maritime, either search and rescue, pollution, comes into our office, and then we pretty much take that information and make sure it gets disseminated to their proper division. So as far as the threat to Hawaii, I like to say, the Coast Guard does a really good job at making sure that you guys are safe, even if you're our mariners out there, go out on wreck boaters, but also that there's almost above $10 billion worth of commerce that goes in and out of Hawaii. It is a major feeder port. All the food that we get comes in through either the port of Honolulu, or if you're on the other islands, you got Willy and so on. So how do we keep that safe? If any of those ports do become down, a terrorist threat, there is an actual event, we have approximately 7 days, right, to food and stuff like that on the island to keep us well. So it is a very important part to keep that port open and operating properly. So a lot of things come in. We've got the threats. So you have people, foreign crew members on vessels, and you have vessels coming in from different parts of the world. Not only coming from the west coast of the United States bringing in goods, but we got stuff coming from China and Asia. So how do we prevent the bad people from coming in? So what happens is these vessels will report in, hey, I'm coming into any of these ports. When they do that, they say, hey, here's who on board, here's what we have, and here's what time we're going to arrive. So and in conjunction with Customs and Border Patrol, make sure that the people and the product that's coming in is safe. It's not going to cause any threat to the port. It's not going to explode. Those people that are on those vessels aren't going to come in and wreak havoc to the Hawaiian Islands. So what we do is we take those names are ran through a system, make sure they're credible mariners, and then also the product that's coming in is coming from a spot that's not deemed, let's say, a violent area or have known to have issues with terrorism or violent action. So there are some countries that are not allowed to come into the United States or are non-entrant vessels, North Korea, Iran, and those are not allowed to come in. So if they try to come in, hey, we're blocked out, we provide information for them, hey, you need to stay out. So once those vessels are cleared and vetted properly, they're allowed to come in, and then once they arrive into the port, they can safely conduct their operations. So that's kind of like in a nutshell of how the ports are kept safe. We also have roving patrols that go through and check those ports on a regular basis to make sure that there aren't any kind of suspicious activity happening out. The biggest part for Oahu is obviously you've got the piers down in the port. So you've got Pier 1 out to Pier 39, all that stuff, then you've got ours on Sand Island. As you can notice, if you drive through there, they're going to have fences around them. They're required to have different security measures to prevent stuff from happening and preventing from disruption of the commerce coming through. So what we have, if you look on the handout on the Homeland Security Advisory Systems page, you have our MARSECs 1, and that's Maritime Security, levels 1 through 3. Kind of echo what Ryan was saying, you want to live in that yellow. So currently we're living in a yellow for as far as MARSEC level, and that's kind of like our minimum protection. There is protection. We have things in place like checking IDs, only authorized people that have different credentials allowed to come onto the port, and that's kind of where we live on a regular basis. And as things come in, the Brussels attack, people kind of deem that, take that information and intelligence and say, hey, do we need to raise our maritime security level? So if there is a credible threat to the ports, to the waterways of the United States, our head is a commandant. He talks to his counterparts and say, hey, do we need to raise our MARSEC levels? He will say yes or no, which brings up to the next level would be 2. And what that is just go on, there's going to be additional precautions put on those facilities or the vessels coming in to make sure that we're prepared for anything to happen. So there may be vehicle checks. The crews, some vessels won't be allowed to come in depending off their select country. Hey, we may not let those people come in because there has been history with them. So you have that credible threat, and then there's an impending threat. Once that impending threat comes on, say, hey, we actually have a credible source saying that there's an attack going to happen at this port at this time, or in general, hey, we have somebody that's had threats against the port. Then we would raise that to a level 3, and that actually adds additional precautions and measures up to those facilities or vessels. So armed guards more likely, not letting anybody on unless they have certain credentials. So those kind of like match up also. Is anybody aware of the National Terrorism Advisory System? Okay, those kind of mirror those. We kind of want to stay in line with those. So, you have no threat at all. They have bulletins that go out, and that kind of address, hey, these are the threats that are going on in the world today. So that's kind of like where we're at now. We're at a bulletin phase. We're at no alerts. As things come on, if there's a credible threat, then we would move up to the elevated alert state. And then that's where we would go in, hey, we need to probably up our ante on security of the facilities and vessels, and we would probably bump ours up to a MARSEC level 2. And then so on, the next one would be an imminent threat. And that's the same thing. There is a credible threat of an impending attack. We would bump ours up to our maritime security level 3. So, and that's kind of works when we do all these things. We have usually on a monthly basis, we meet with our port partners. So we have Sauce Brothers, you have Young Brothers, all those. We meet with them regularly to kind of talk about what would be our response if something were to happen within the ports. We kind of come up with, hey, if we have this threat here, this is what we want everybody in the port to do, add extra security elements, vessel checks or vehicles coming on. So we work regularly with those port partners to make sure that we're all in line, in addition to working with our other agency partners to make sure that we have in line with what our response would be. So it kind of brings me to how can that affect you? So you have Hawaii Kai here. It's a small boat harbor. We do patrols down here. You're not going to have the commercial big draft vessels coming on, but you are going to have, you have a lot of dive, snorkeling type tours out here, jet skis. Hey, how is that going to affect potential terrorism in your area? Terrorism comes in many forms. I'm speaking more of the larger level, the ports, but you could have these local harbors, right? Homegrown terrorism, conducting stuff like that. So where'd you come into making sure you do your part within the community? See something, say something, right? You see something that looks suspicious, you want to call the local authorities, call the police department. In addition to that, we work hand in hand with the police department a lot. If it has to do with the waterways, they're going to contact us and say, hey, we've got this going on. Do you have any assets or anything that can help us out? We have an intelligence department. We have an investigative service that can help investigate threats or any kind of criminal activity within the port. So you see something, say something. On that second side of that handout, you're going to have a number. It's a Sector Honolulu. That's the office that I work in. If there is something you call the police department, you want to call us as well, they should be calling us, but If you don't have their number on hand, 911, I have this in my pocket, I might as well call the Coast Guard, right? That information will get to us, and then we'll develop a response for that or investigate that further. In addition to, you may be required to contact that second number, which is the National Response Center. So there's a thing called American Waterways. Any kind of threat that could be duplicated in many ports, they have like a fusion center that they take all this information and they kind of see trends that are happening. So when you call that American Waterways NRC, which most likely, if you call us, we directed you to do that because you were the person that's seeing all this thing that want to get the most accurate information. And that just helps us get a database of what's going on. So, my presentation is as long as Ryan's, but I just kind of want to say, hey, you can feel safe that the waters that are surrounding you are not, I want to say there's no threat to them, but they are protected. And if there is any questions on what you can do as far as helping out the Coast Guard, you feel free to call that number that's on the Sector Honolulu side. And like I said, I appreciate the time being able to speak to y'all. And if you have any questions, I'll be sitting up here. And like I say, I appreciate your time. Mahalo.
Thank you, sir. If this was going to be a quiz, I'd say, what does MARSEC mean? Yeah, it took me a while to figure that one out. But also you saw the yellow, so there's a reinforcement that's coming. So from the Coast Guard, we're going to go to Darrick White, Field Intelligence Officer of TSA and Homeland Security. Darrick White. Darrick, welcome, Darrick.
Thanks, sir. Thank you very much, Representative Ward, Hawaii Kai community. Appreciate you guys having me out. Don't worry, I'll make up the time and the slides. Not very many opportunities for TSA to come out and really speak, so I'll make that up. I did bring my clock up here, so I'll make sure we stay within the 15 and run through. In fact, I'll go ahead and start that now. As we've seen with the Brussels and Russian airliner that came down in Egypt, and we've also noticed the Somali airliner just recently as well. We face a determined enemy, an adaptive enemy. Terrorism, transportation against terrorism targets remains a viable target for them. We're also interested and concerned about other attacks against our officers. Representative Ward asked me to come out and talk a little bit about officer safety, and I'm going to do that and touch on that somewhat. LAX, of course, that was the first shooting. Officer Hernandez, the first death at the hands of an active shooter. We also had a machete attack in New Orleans, and we've also had a couple incidents here in Honolulu where our officers were attacked. So officer safety is paramount. It's something that I go out and brief these guys on constantly. But I like to remind them it's not just about your officer safety and not just about you here in the workplace. It's also about you as an individual and with your family. As we've seen with Paris and San Bernardino, you don't know what's going to happen or when it's going to happen. That could be you in a movie theater. It could be you somewhere else, not in your work environment with a loved one. Take a few seconds, look around, know where the exits are, have a plan. Okay, you don't have to ruin your whole night, right? Wife's looking at you, man. We thought we was going to have a good time. You're all, worried. So you don't have to worry about that. Okay, just take a few seconds to do that. Again, I'm Darrick White, the Field Intelligence Officer for TSA. I've been with TSA over 4 years now. I've been out here in Hawaii for just over a year. I absolutely love it. I've got a family, 5 kids. Yes, we packed up and moved, and absolutely love it out here. My background is a lot of military, 22 some odd years with, and still in the reserves, both enlisted and officers. So for those who know, going from enlisted to officer, it's the part of the dark side. So, and I've dealt with this problem set for quite some time. So what I want to do again tonight is just run through really a TSA 101 kind of a briefing. Now, I took this is what we're supposed to give, but I made some changes. Now, I won't tell Administrator Neffinger if you don't. So I did adapt it a little bit. All right, so I'm a simple guy. This is what I want to talk about tonight. Provide a little background on TSA, why we were developed, why we do what we do, what are our concerns, and then what are we doing to address some of those concerns. All right, next slide. In remembrance of 9/11. Next slide. All right, we were created in the aftermath of 9/11. And in 2003, we became part of the Department of Homeland Security. And today, most of you guys know us as screening passengers. We screen about 2 million passengers daily, over 700 million a year. Next slide. Our mission's fairly simple. Protect the nation's transportation system to ensure freedom of movement and commerce. And quite a few transportation entities up there. The Metro Rail, comes to mind, and dealing with that, as you see with the Brussels attack. I'll talk about that a little bit later as we go through the presentation. But most of our resources really are in the aviation sector. Next slide. We employ just over about 42,000 transportation security officers. Out here in the Pacific, we're just over about 1,500. One thing I want to point out, though, is not only are we screening passengers and all those passengers coming in, but you're also looking at about 1.2 million checked bags and 4.4 million carry-on bags. So quite a few bags going through, and they all have to get screened. We all have to go through the process. Next slide. All right, last year, you'll notice up here, the amount of guns actually increased that are coming through our checkpoint. Many of those are loaded, and many of those have a round chambered. So when anybody asks, why do we do some of the things we do, this is still the reason. Slide on as you're looking on your left, that was from last week. It's kind of hard to see, but again, that's April 1st through the 7th. I believe there was 50 some odd that came through last week. We looked that up on the TSA blog site. That's a great site. Next slide. All right, the concealed prohibited items. Believe it or not, we still have some crazy things coming through, and this is what our officers have to deal with all the time, and we have to take the time and actually resolve when these things come up. So just in Honolulu a couple of weeks ago, we had 4 inert grenades coming through. So we actually, you had to stop the process. We have to call on our bomb experts, and they have to come down and really take a look at this and figure out what's going on. If we can't get it resolved, we're making all kinds of phone calls. So, and then on the right. This came up a couple weeks ago. I think it was actually out in the news, where it talks about protruding wires. This was, I think they called it art. So, abstract art. That's what's coming through. But we noticed, there's all kinds of things, concealed and prohibited that we have to take the time, look at, and resolve. Or they don't go through. Thank you. We can go to the next slide up there. So between Al-Qaeda and the Arabian Peninsula and ISIS, we've got our hands full, right? I know Ryan and his group have their hands full. It is a big concern. It's a concern for us. Up here is Inspire magazine. Inspire magazine, I think, is one of the most often cited for anybody is radicalizing, and I think there's been only a few issues that have come out from Inspire magazine that don't have some kind of a tactic or a target interlaced. Up here, take a look. This came out back in, I think this is issue 13. Talks about TSA security. Now, we've gone out in the interest of letting our TSOs know. These guys are out there. They're talking about how we conduct our security measures and how they can circumvent those. So if you look, we have on the left, it's kind of hard to see, they're talking about using the handheld metal detector and how to beat that system by using a non-metallic type device. the dogs and the canines talking about trying to mask the scent of the weapons or the bombs. They talk about, and you'll see on the left corner, where they talk about developing the hidden bomb, where they can take this and put it in a certain area on the body, knowing that it is a sensitive area that is subject, it's a sensitive area that many people do not want to, number one, be checked, and our TSOs really don't want to be checking there, but we have to resolve that alarm. And the next one you'll see, it talks about the AIT machines that we have up, and what they've put out is, and what they've suggested that they do is not go through those machines, that they pick a lane or an airport, a smaller airport, if you will, that does not have those types of technology and equipment. This isn't new for this group. I went ahead and put on Operation Hemorrhage. This is from years ago, 2010, when the cartridge bomb, when they were looking to do that with the printers, and they lament that it cost them only $4,200, and look what we're paying to protect ourselves now. So it's always been on their mind. It remains a target and always will be a target. Next slide. Dabiq Magazine. Dabiq Magazine is probably the best well-known of ISIS, and their English language version. There's other versions out there. When Ryan talks about social media and their reach, I would just like to second that. This group is well funded. They know what they're doing. They know how to target audiences. When we talk about recruiters and recruiters on social media, they can reach not only with the Dabiq Magazine talking to an English audience. They have other types of newsletters and magazines that are out there that are focused certain demographics in certain countries. So they have a far reach. And what we're seeing today, more so, and they have done a much better job than Al-Qaeda ever did, was to have somebody pick up the mantle and actually conduct an attack. The attacks they're calling for are not new. These have been around for decades. What is new is that people are actually picking up the calling, picking up the mantle, and conducting the attacks. And that's what we're concerned with. And that's what Ryan's got his hands full. And we have our hands full as well. Next slide. When we talk about how do we address this, we talk about risk-based security. Not everybody here is a terrorist. Mr. Pistol, our former administrator, said we got to buy down risk, and knowing that. And I'm going to talk just a little bit more about that as we go along in the presentation. Next slide. So airport security before 9/11, and what does it look like now? So before you had, before 9/11, really checkpoint-centric. But now you've heard it, and even just heard it in the recent couple of days with some of Admiral Neffenger's comments before Congress, is pushing out that perimeter. These are some of the types of things that we have been doing for quite some time, from our K-9 teams to our Viper teams, to our behavior detection officers, to the types of equipment that we have, to our engagement with our local sheriff's office, HPD. That's all part of pushing out that security. We noticed from the Brussels attack, right? They didn't have to come in, right? They didn't have to go through security. They didn't want to go through security. They had their effect where? In that checkpoint, where everyone, right, lined up in the ticketing area. We've known that for quite some time, so that's why we have, and why we actually put out that visible presence. Next slide. All right, we talk about secure flight. There are individuals who we don't want to fly, and we have them on the no-fly. There are individuals who are not on a no-fly, but they are what we call a higher risk passenger. We want to make sure that those individuals are screened appropriately. We have measures in place to make sure that those individuals are screened. Next slide. When we talk about pre-check, I love pre-check. I hated not having pre-check. And if you don't have pre-check, I suggest you kind of look into it, especially if you're flying quite a bit. You can keep your shoes on. Again, this is part of that known. So just like, oh, look at that, 15. I got more slides too, but don't worry. Don't worry, I'll wrap it up soon. I'm taking your time, so. All right, so pre-check, great idea. Part of that, buying down the risk, more of that known population, right? That known. We have over 2 million people, I believe, have signed up, and I think, hopefully we can get some more folks signed up. Next slide. Our international efforts. A lot of people don't realize that we do have officers overseas in embassies and working with our foreign counterparts and working with our airliners who are departing flights from overseas, and they're doing some of that inspections and looking at the airport and dealing with those guys. When something happens overseas, these are one of the folks that we're going to call, right? So when the Russian airliner goes down in Egypt, we want to know when's the last time that airport, and you read it in the paper, when's the last time that airport had some kind of an assessment? Do they have flights that go from that airport over just directly from that airport to ours? If they don't, where do they go first? What's the screening like? All these questions are coming up, and these are the guys that are going to answer those, and a lot of people don't know that we have those out there. Next slide. Part of our vetting and credentialing program, you've seen, and you've probably seen in the news over the past couple of days, this has been a topic of that recurring vetting process to ensure that if they're going to fly a plane or work at the airport or drive some dangerous chemicals, that we are able to fully vet them through all the databases that are available. Next slide. TWIC, I won't go into that much. That deals more with the ports, and the Coast Guard handles that, and some really smart people up at headquarters. Next slide. All right, I mentioned this earlier, the visible intermodal prevention and response teams. These came about after the 2005 Madrid train attack, if you guys recall that. Or was it 2004? I think it was 2005. So we started doing this because, again, we wanted to push out that perimeter, but we're not talking about the airport now. We're talking about working in conjunction with our partners and our private industry partners out in the community to be able to have that visible presence so that people can feel safe, that we are able to deter and or disrupt any kind of attack that would take place. Next slide. Our Office of Law Enforcement, we have an Assistant Federal Security Director for law enforcement. They deal directly with the agents and our law enforcement counterparts with HPD and the airport, and they're doing a lot of the liaison work, and they are over those Vipers. They are a force multiplier when it comes to having that capability. Next slide. K-9 teams, absolutely love them. I wish we had more of them, and we're asking Congress for more of them. They're very effective. Whether you're running drugs or you're running something, weapons, or nobody likes the dogs because they're good. We want more of them. Next slide. We talked briefly about the oversight that happens overseas. We also have that regulatory arm here. So if you look at and you think about TSA, you think about like a slice of pie. Sounds good right now, right? Slice of pie. So you think about, look at that piece of pie, and you cut it into thirds. You've got that LE component, you've got a compliance or regulatory component, and you've got a screening component. Next slide. We also have our, what do we call it, the transportation security specialists, and they deal with explosives. A lot of these guys have years and years of experience working Iraq, Afghanistan, some big trouble sets. Next slide. We work a lot with our other components. Of course, you see sitting here at the table, we also have members that sit up at TSOC and all these other agencies that are out there working together to try to protect, and it's a big job, try to protect the transportation system to ensure free commerce and free movement. Next slide. All right. TSA does care. And I have used this for a family member, and I didn't know it was out there. If anybody's going through or you're traveling with an airport and you need some extra special attention with those needs, you can call this number and get in touch with those guys. They will get in touch with the airport personnel, and we'll make sure that you are taken care of. I'll leave that up there. It's all, you also have the email as well. Next slide. And we also, you can find us, TSA blog, if you ever just want to see what kind of things that are coming out, you can look up that. It's totally unclassified. Some of the things that come through it still boggles my mind. All right, next slide. All right, well, thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate you letting me come out and speak to you. Appreciate it.
Darrick, thank you again for all you do at TSA, and thank you for the pre-check. Any of you who've been through the pre-check at TSA? Isn't that convenient? Very, 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 very helpful. Last but not least, and before I introduce him and bring him up here, we are having probably one of what I believe is probably one of the best active shooter educational videos from the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department. We're going to take a few minutes before I bring up Sergeant Kadooka, who's going to speak about the active shooter, which HPD is specialized on, and particularly he himself has done it a number of times. So if Shannon can play the LA active shooter video.
A morning that began like any other turned tragic today when an employee opened fire on his supervisor and fellow coworkers.
Students, parents, teachers are asking why today after a bloody rampage plunged this campus into tragedy.
Details are just coming in, but we're being told that a heavily armed gunman opened fire this evening at the mall food court behind me. There's no official word on any casualties yet, but one eyewitness reported seeing at least 6 people shot.
Active shooter. A gunman or gunmen killing or attempting to kill people in a confined, populated area.
You gotta get some sleep. You're looking like a vampire.
You sleep. You ain't got no babies at home keeping you up.
What the hell? Ah, Sam again.
We've tried. I'm sorry. We're gonna have to let you go.
Active shooter killings are a tragic, unpredictable reality, and one that's becoming more common.
Since 2006, the U.S. has averaged an active shooter event with 4 or more deaths every 2.9 months.
Even though the number of active shooter events has been increasing, your odds of being involved in one are still very slim. But just like fire drills and earthquake preparedness, making a plan in advance can make all the difference.
Yeah, but lizards live in tanks. I mean, it's probably fine.
If you do find yourself in the middle of a senseless attack, the why doesn't matter.
Hey. Hey, buddy.
Hang on, something's happening.
What matters is surviving.
On average, 20 mass shootings take place in the U.S. every year.
Killers usually choose their victims at random. They look for easy targets. So the harder you are to see or to hit, the safer you are. When an attack starts, if you can find a way out of the location, do so.
Get out.
If you stay calm and think clearly, even in the middle of a life and death event, you improve your chances of making it out. Visualize your movements in advance.
What are we gonna do?
Look at me. I can get us out. Stay behind me. Stay down.
Use cover, something that will stop a bullet, and concealment, something that at least keeps you out of sight.
Attention South LA units, code 3 response needed regarding a 245 DSV 417. This will be at the Town Center shopping mall. Suspects wearing a face mask, possible body armor.
Use any available means to get out, including emergency exits or windows. Most restaurants and retail locations will also have exits in the back through kitchens or stock rooms. Even in the best cases, police are minutes, not seconds away. You must take action to protect yourself.
Okay, everybody stay calm. It's probably just a drill.
No, go back, go back.
Oh my God, come here.
If you can help others without putting yourself in unnecessary danger,
It's gonna be okay.
do so.
It's gonna be okay. What's your name?
Lori.
Lori? It's gonna be okay.
If you can't move safely to an exit, get to a room or a confined area you can lock down. Then secure the location.
Secure your location.
Oh my God.
There's somebody shooting.
Everybody stay calm. Remember how we train. Everybody get in this corner, away from the windows. Get the emergency bag from my desk. Help her.
Drywall won't stop a bullet, but there are steps to take to stay safe. Lock or barricade the doors, turn off the lights, move away from any windows, and silence your cell phone.
The other door doesn't lock. Move desks or anything, just block it.
A modern emergency bag can include a first aid kit, gloves, emergency plans for the building, and casualty cards to alert first responders to any wounded victims.
Most active shooter situations are over in 10 to 15 minutes.
Attention Lakeway units, code 3 is needed, red 245 GSV 417. It's going to be at Alexandria College. Multiple victims down.
Law enforcement's first responsibility when entering an active shooter situation is to stop the suspect, not to render aid to the victims. Medical teams will enter the scene as soon as the suspect is no longer a threat or is confirmed in another location. Silence any cell phones and remain quiet. Do not alert the shooter to your presence.
Sheriff's Department, is there anyone inside?
Red card.
Just hang tight. We'll be back to get you.
Defend yourself.
If you cannot escape the location and you can't shelter in place, you may have to defend yourself as a last resort. Almost anything can be turned into an improvised weapon. Look for something that can disrupt the shooter's ability to see, breathe, or control their weapon. When law enforcement arrives, they are going to be in a heightened state of readiness and awareness, looking for any aggressive movements. So keep your hands visible and follow any commands you are given.
He's a shooter.
Okay.
Hey, let me see your hands. Come here. What happened? What happened?
Oh, it was just a shooter. I just saw one shooter.
Especially in developing situations, engaging law enforcement, running toward them, reaching for them, even to thank them, could put people at risk.
Surviving an active shooter.
Anybody injured? Two up front.
For more information,
Thank you. Seriously.
visit activeshooter.lasd.org.
And by way of introduction, that's for Hawaii HPD active shooter expert. Please welcome Kevin Kadooka. Sergeant, it's all yours.
Actually, that pretty much covered it. Any questions? No, thank you, Representative Ward, staff in his office for allowing us to come here and present something like this. Also, thank you guys for attending. I know you guys probably had a long day, so I'll try to make it as quick as possible. At HPD, we cannot do this alone. Just like all the other agencies sitting here, in fact, every time we do some of these things, we see one another. So it shows a continuous flow of information, and part of it is also knowing one another. That's half the battle right there. So surviving an active shooter was actually supposed to be covered for that South Target thing, but since that's already covered on the video, I'm gonna kind of push on to the slides over here. So part of what we do at HPD is not to make people paranoid, okay? It's just more of an awareness type thing. So most of you guys are here for Is Hawaii Safe? And what I'm not gonna be discussing, go over stats or anything, because that's not pretty much what, that's not my area. Statistically, yes, if you look at the stats, Hawaii is very low. So earlier, Mr. Ward said, do you feel safe? Yes, Hawaii is a safe place. Okay, and an active shooter is a very small, very specific type of incident. I mean, you guys probably have a bigger chance of getting another type of crime done to you as opposed to an active shooter. So what I'm going to be talking about is what is HPD doing to make Hawaii safe. Okay, since Columbine, as you've seen up there, it was covered earlier, active shooter for Xerox. Okay, the date for Xerox was November of 1999. And if you look at this date, Columbine was April of 1999, so it was that same year. So it was a big hot topic in Hawaii. You open up the paper and you see that right there, right after Columbine, okay? So through the years, what we've been doing is to ramp up. In fact, right after that, we started our training already. It was a little hodgepodge, but we had to come up with something really quick to counter this kind of things. Okay, so since then, since 1999, HPD has been doing some type of training. Okay, can you go next slide, please? So through the years, can you go one back, sorry. So through the years, we've actually, in the last couple of years, we've changed our training. I believe Mr. White covered it in his presentation, how the bad guys are evolving. So just as much as the bad guys evolve, we have to evolve too and change. Okay, so we started off with all these different types of training and tactical programs that didn't work. So we keep going and going up until what we have now, which is basically a nationwide standardized type training. And what's good about it is that because we're all trained statewide, it doesn't matter what agency we team up with, okay? Next slide, please. So joint training, that's how we improve ourselves. I said a little bit earlier, we can't do this by ourselves. HPD is not the is-all, be-all. We have to rely on different agencies to assist us. So what we do is we partner with other agencies and we train with other agencies. Okay? One is so that they know how we're doing it, and others, we know what they're doing too. Okay? Next slide, please. So to this date, we've actually trained over 2,000 officers statewide. We've also trained with the other counties too, okay, because we feel that it's not only Honolulu that's going to be affected, there may be other counties too that may be affected too. So we do train with other agencies. Next slide, please. Multi-agency, that's really important too. Little bit about what we've been doing the last couple of years, that FEX is called a field exercise. Military, we've already trained with joint base at the different places, Navy Exchange. So sometimes what we do is we train off hours. So if you're going to that facility and you see a whole lot of officers standing out in front in different things, that's probably what's going on. We're doing a multi-agency type training. We just did the hospitals, colleges too, as we know in Virginia Tech, all different levels of colleges, everything from elementary school, from Sandy Hook all the way up to Virginia Tech were affected by active shooter. So we've also been dealing with the colleges as well as the university system to train and get the awareness out there. And next slide, please. So what are we doing to prepare the community? Well, we continue to go out there and assist government and non-government agencies. Like us talking to the young lady over there in the front, she was asking about what we can do. We don't have enough time, but we do have a program that we do go out into the community and present it to government agencies. In fact, we're been pretty busy. Like the last couple of weeks, we've actually presented about 20-something already from January to now, to go out into the community and prepare the community for an active shooter event. Okay? And the last thing I kind of wanted to close with, you can go to the last slide, is this is probably one training that we provide to the community where we hope you never use. There's other stuff we go out there, you probably sat in through it about financial fraud and identity theft, and those are the ones that the officers are telling you to do. Well, this is one presentation where we go out there where you never ever have to do it. But hopefully when a situation does come, at least part of what these gentlemen have been giving you will be, give you a little bit of an awareness of what's going on out there in case something does happen. Yeah. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Now it's the community's turn to ask questions and to make comments and to see what are some of the things that you may need more details on or more specifics to elaborate on. And because it's on Olelo, they've designated the microphone here to the right. So if you have a question, don't be shy. Come and speak into the microphone. And I can see everybody's getting up and running to the microphone. I want to ask the question to the... No, let me wait. Okay, here's a gentleman. Are you leaving or are you going to take... Oh, you got a question. Okay. Otherwise, I have a filler question, but I will get back to that. No, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
I understand that we are told during an emergency to be able to shelter in place, which means stay home, and you can't go to the store, and so forth. I was told that shelter in place for 1 week is what we should all prepare for. That would be for earthquake or tsunami, etc. My question is, why is it only 1 week? Shouldn't we be maybe prepared for 2 weeks?
So you want the time?
I want to know I once upon a time at the Civil Defense Shelter, they said that the reason it was a week was because that's how long it takes a ship to get here from California to supply us.
Let's see if HPD or Homeland Security or this Coast Guard or FBI, do any of you gentlemen know why it's the 1 week? Please.
I don't know the specifics why it's 1 week, but that is typically, well, hey, if we're going to get somebody out here, we have, takes typically, I would say, about a week to get a ship from wherever to bring supplies here. I know that on average, you have about 7 days of supplies on the island for food, and at that time we're going to deplete it and we're going to need more. So they want you to plan for 7 days because, hey, we might not be, everybody may rush to the grocery stores and nab everything up, so you want to be prepared because they are going to be making plans. Now, if the port goes down, I know Kevin's going to be working on it tomorrow, but they do alternate port exercises where if the port of Honolulu goes down, we have an alternate place where if a ship needs to come in, they have a place to do that. So that may not be the correct answer, but having the ability to sustain yourself for a week will probably most likely be the answer of having that time for another shipment of goods to come out here.
Thank you. Last question I would have is for anybody who works in the community, if you see something suspicious, report it or at least inquire. I didn't know this, but hydrogen peroxide is a material in making bombs. So if you see someone buying all the hydrogen peroxide off the shelves at Long's and carrying out a shopping cart worth, mention it. I don't know that they got that much
It's
hair.
not for their bad breath, it's for something else, okay. Or their antiseptic
The
wound.
kind of things that I think public could actually be useful. The FBI can address that.
You see the gentleman's point, is awareness of your surroundings and awareness of what may be dangerous and what may not be. You want to pick that up and run with his question?
Sure. Thanks for bringing that up. One of the things that we are doing that I didn't mention in my talk is we've got and it sounds like a lot worse than it is. We have a weapons of mass destruction coordinator. He's the person who handles stuff like precursor chemicals and that kind of thing. We have a fairly robust tripwire program with a lot of the local purveyors of things that are just like that, precursor chemicals that can be used in explosives. Everything from beauty supply stores to Lowe's and Home Depot and those kinds of folks. The FBI, and we reach out to those tripwires, pool supply stores, all the folks who do this kind of thing. We go out and we meet with them, and so from the seller side, we have programs where we try and solicit just that kind of feedback. Certainly from the community as well. I mean, if you see someone doing something that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, you can ask them what, and that usually helps figure it out relatively quickly whether they have a reasonable response or not. But certainly we don't want you opening up your own investigation. But hey, what do but yeah, let us know that, and just know that in addition to soliciting that kind of feedback from the community, that's something that we work hard on, whether it be from fertilizer companies or nurseries, places that sell stuff that can be used for nefarious purposes. We have someone whose full-time job it is to make sure that we're contacting them. We have handouts for them, flyers about what to look for, not just hydrogen peroxide, but other chemicals, other things that can be used nefariously. So that's something that we're doing here in Hawaii, and we do nationwide as well.
Any other gentlemen comments? Yes, madam, please.
When assistance comes, like if there's an outage or anything, Hawaii is usually one of the last ones to get assistance, like to be moved up the food chain a little bit. Get assistance a little bit earlier than last.
Madam, you prefer not to be on the Olelo taping because they can't hear you without being at the microphone. And I don't remember well enough all the things that you said, but if you could come back, that Hawaii Kai is maybe not first in line for...
We're last.
We are last in line. You better tell your representative that.
What's his name?
Please.
Gene. Okay. Whenever there's an emergency, Hawaii Kai is usually one of the last to get assistance. I would like to be moved up a little bit so we're not always the last to get, or next to the last to get electricity or whatever assistance needed. I realize we're not near any base, the other places are closer, but I sure would appreciate a little bit faster response than last or second to last.
Okay, who's going to
I
defend
know
my...
there's nothing you can do about it, but say, oh, that lady's going to bitch if I get there last, so I just better do it now. So that's me.
Okay, which one of you are going to defend my community?
Gene, that's all you.
She's right in the flood. Do you remember the flood of '88 when there was only one way in and one way out, and basically you couldn't get out of Hawaii Kai? We were literally at the last of everything. And that's where the 1 week should have been 2 weeks. The flood of '88 was just heart-wrenching and devastating. Food, water, electricity, everything was just really at a rare availability. But in terms of what we have now, in terms of electrical and water, I think we're kind of holding our own in the comparison to where some of the communities, some of my colleagues say it takes them 2 hours to even get into the office, and some of their communities have had outages of electricity for periods that we haven't. We can obviously do better. In fact, one of the reasons why I'm in office is to make Hawaii Kai a better place, and I will take your note into consideration. I also wanted to point out in your handout, one of the reasons why it's not likely there'll be terrorism, and it was mentioned indirectly, that we have a coconut wireless. Everybody sees and knows everybody else, or everybody's related to somebody else. And so when there's stuff that's suspicious, when they say, see something, say something, you know, it's kind of easier here because we're such a small community. And that's something we can do very, very well. Other questions that you have? Yes, madam.
I've got 3 questions.
3 questions. Shoot.
Recently, in the last 6 months, I've done a lot of traveling, and I was injured in a major motor vehicle accident. So I've made use of the wheelchair services that the airlines provide. And I've had all kinds of crazy screening experiences, but what worries me is I've had a few experiences where I was just kind of waved through. And I guess I'm wondering if there's a way to make sure that little loophole is tighter.
That's a TSA question for sure.
Okay, so your concern is that you were just waved through?
I walked through a metal detector instead of doing the whatever AIG machine a couple of times. People are very polite and courteous, and it's not always here. One of the times it happened was at Hartsfield International in Atlanta.
Okay.
But I know people tend, because I work with people with disabilities, people tend to defer, and it's kind of one of those awkward things like the search places you were talking about. So I'm just wondering if there's any way that we can shore that up a little bit.
Well, number one, I'm glad that you were always treated with the utmost dignity and respect. I always preach that, if you will. Number two, we do have certain procedures in place, and the officers are there, and they have an SOP, if you will, standard operating procedure. And if you go through and you do alarm, they have a resolution process that they go through. I would have to get more specifics on the time and then the date that you went through. Obviously, we don't want to have someone coming through who alarms and they don't go through that resolution procedure, right? Because
that is what happened.
Yeah. So that's what we don't want. So if you can remember the time and the date, and I mean, hey, if you've got an officer's name, that's great. It's a great training opportunity for that officer, and we'll take that back. But it is something, I'll take that back to our leadership. It is something that concerns us, and we'll make sure that we stay on top of things like that.
Next question.
Thank you. The next question, I guess, would be HPD. I'm currently a master's candidate at Chaminade. I also attended UH. I can't recall in any time since 2006 to now at either one of my schools having any kind of active shooter training or any kind of anything like that. So I'm just wondering if it's being done or in the works or.
Usually it'd be up to the host agency to contact us for that type of training. Yeah, we don't, because if the agency doesn't want us to provide it, then we won't force ourselves on them. All of our responses are from the requests from the agencies.
I see.
So are you requesting an active shooter training? Can she request?
I just think that it would be a great idea since we have students. I was an RA at UH for a few years. I also worked for the East-West Center as housing staff coordinator. We had 64 different countries and nationalities coming in. I just feel like it makes sense to maybe even encourage the schools to put something like that in place.
Yeah, actually, if you run it up, that's how it usually starts. It starts off from the bottom because either employees or staff wants it, and then it kind of runs up the chain, and then they contact us. So if we can probably pass it up your.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you.
Did you find that video helpful, the active shooter video?
Yeah, I've never seen that before. It was kind of traumatizing, but I found it the most helpful. I was also a DOE teacher, and we had active shooter training. But I feel like that video was way more realistic and helpful.
You had one more question.
One more question. It probably is FBI. I was curious about the creative bomb maker. What kind of creative strategies are being employed to kind of stay ahead of him?
Good question.
Well, I think that goes a lot in with our work with TSA folks. I think that they and all the folks who work at the port. In general, there's certain things about explosives that are the same no matter how creative you get, and I think that's the kind of things that we look for most. From our side, we have people who aren't generally in Hawaii. In my old office in WFO, who work cases full-time on those guys overseas and work to make sure that we're aware of those things when they happen, the same way we do any kind of investigation. So we would work those overseas targets and try and figure out what they're doing, and then make sure that information is pushed forward to the folks who protect the communities from that. So I can't specifically talk about that case, but that's generally how it works. So what's happening overseas, whether that's something that we find, if you go back several years, you'll find, stories in the newspaper where various things have been tried, and usually they are interdicted at some point by us for those reasons I said. But even beyond that, additional stuff that we'll get that doesn't necessarily make the papers will be pushed out, and we'll be trying to be on the lookout. So like Darrick said, I mean, we're constantly trying to change our tactics to make sure that we have that, and the idea that, we're not working in silos. The FBI doesn't work here, TSA doesn't work here. That's completely gone now, and things are shared very easily between the folks who gather the information that would protect us and the people who actually protect us from various things like these gentlemen. So that's all I'll say about that.
Thank you. That's very encouraging.
It was definitely a takeaway that there are so many overlapping teams that you guys are really of the same family. There's just different responsibilities as it goes. Okay, who's going to ask? Yes, ma'am.
On the cards that the teacher had, are those cards she made herself or cards you get somewhere, purchase?
Which cards, madam?
The cards the teacher had in her bag.
Oh.
Yeah, that'll be up to the agencies to develop their own system. Every agency is different. Some agencies don't even use that type of marking or response.
Okay.
I mean, when the teacher put the card under the door?
Showed casualty and then put the cards under the door, but she never unlocked the door.
They were very prepared to be able to respond with probably a card stock with a, what do they call it? You laminate it and you slide it back and forth. That's really doing a preparation plan for an evacuation. And they knew what they were doing. They just said, okay, let's now do what we practiced. And we practice by looking for, before we do any wrap-up statements, any other questions? Yes, madam.
Good evening. I would just like to know whether or not there's been any credible hard or soft threats against Hawaii and Oahu specifically.
Excellent question, because that was my filler question to the FBI. You know, they talk about credible threats. Have we ever had one, and how do you guys decide when there is one, Ryan? Been wanting to ask what's credible threat and how you get it. Have we ever had one? Thank you for asking that question.
Nice softball right at the end, right? So, no, thanks for asking. As of right now, I can say that there are no credible threats to terrorism to Hawaii specifically. The things I talked about were more general threats to that can pop up everywhere, so which means that you're in kind of a state of where a threat can pop up very quickly and go from not being a threat at all to being like a really big threat. You'll also, and the best I find is to quote my boss on this. So if, Director Comey has said that every field office has some of these ISIS investigations, at least one. I am in a field office, and so that includes my office as well. We don't talk about active investigations, but I'll tell you that what we generally do is we have a SOP like anybody else where we take the things that come in. So a lot of times things come into me and they appear to be credible threats, or they may actually be credible threats, and they may end up not being credible threats very quickly. So we get those on a near daily basis, and almost all of them washout, things that are observed. Some of them take a little bit longer to wash out. Some of them don't turn out to be threats. So we don't have any credible threats to Hawaii for terrorism, but every day our job is to take in information about what comes in, either from elsewhere or here, figure out whether the person actually poses a threat to Hawaii, and then dispatch that or disrupt it, like happens on JTTFs all over the United States. So how we adjudicate that is we have a whole process with my boss and my boss's boss and the people at headquarters, and we take a look at everything that comes in, and we investigate it at the level that's appropriate for the threat, for the information that we have, and then we make a determination based on this kind of threat mitigation strategy, what should be done next. So I know that's not a great answer.
But you make the decision here. It's not somebody on the mainland.
Not always. I mean, we have a headquarters desk. It's what's called a substantive desk. So there's a counterterrorism division in headquarters that also reports. Obviously, we all report to the director, but the director oversees them. So it's a combination of what happens out here at the field office. So like I said, we might have some things that never rise to the level of getting there, and then we have other things that ends up getting shared and pushed to headquarters and sorted out that way. Yes.
Brian, you have given them your personal phone number, right? Or the phone number that gets to where if they've seen something to say something, it goes directly within your office, or is it to you, or what?
Correct. So the one office is I gave you the phone number to my desk, which I'm not afraid to do that. And then there's also the phone number for the actual FBI office, where you can make a report. And some of the best, and one of the best ways to do it is just online. If you feel like going to FBI.gov, there's a tip line there where you can also put in information for the FBI should you choose that you should. So we never shy away from tips.
I'm going to piggyback on that last question of a credible threat, because we're going to hand out a credible threat now, and it's going to be ending on something that you saw earlier in a video, but it's something that people don't usually think of, but only occasional. And there's a slide that notes by a quote, and this is from the Admiral William Courtney. He's the Northern Command who works with the Pacific Command, who, by the way, we were in contact with, but they were not able to make it this evening. His quote ends by basically saying, "We watch North Korea very carefully, and you know their very long range capability is a function of how far they do reach. So even from their own waters, they can reach part of our homeland. Hawaii is part of our homeland, and they can reach Hawaii." We used to think that they didn't have the power to get this far, but there is a credible technology, if you will, that goes beyond that. The other part of it, I think, is where the activities of 2016, and by the way, this is from the Missile Defense Alliance, which I said earlier, President Kochi of the Senate had a visitor and a briefing in the Majority Caucus office to get us up to speed, to say, just like, almost like we're doing tonight, let the people know what's going on in terms of security. And the Missile Defense Advocacy Alliance says, let the people know that, this thing with Korea is not just a flash in the pan. This is very serious stuff. So they conducted their fourth nuclear test just a couple of months ago, and just last month released a propaganda video. And if you want to look at it, you can just Google "Last Chance North Korea." It'll show probably about 9 minutes or so, Shannon, is it? And then at the end, it shows a nuclear explosion over the White House. I mean, it's a propaganda film, but there are ways that when you see our generals before the Senate Investigation Committee saying that this is the homeland that they can reach, Hawaii, that is a very, very serious threat. Nobody from the Missile Defense Alliance could make it because they're based on the mainland, but I wanted to bring that as the last handout. Lastly, in wrapping up, I have a couple of things I want to bring your attention to. First is the source of all the information. If you have the last page, if you could look at the last page where it says resources, this is not your homework, but if you wanted to dig into some of the information that's in the packet or some of the things you've heard tonight, or if you want to download that active shooter, all of the URLs, all of the web pages, all the citations are there, and even some forum takeaways. What are some of the things that are meaningful enough to remember? For example, awareness of what the government, you are now aware of what the TSA is doing, what the FBI is doing, what Homeland Security is doing, and what the HPD. In fact, is a good reminder. Let's give them another round of applause for all of the things that they do and that they continue to do. Gentlemen, we are very, very, very grateful. Another takeaway is not written here is like live yellow. You know, in other words, enjoy life, but be aware of your surroundings and having a keener awareness of what's around it. And Kevin, you get the award for the first phone call that's in print from at least my office, 5293-111. We're going to call you up if we got any immediate problems. Now we're going to go HPD. Lastly, we have another question before I do a wrap-up and some other mahalos for Olelo and other people. Yes, sir.
I do have a question. In regards to the active shooters, yes, they pick on schools because it's a gun-free zone, they're not going to be stopped. And they know they can do all kinds of damage. I'm a polio survivor with post-polio syndrome. I cannot run away from a dangerous situation. And Hawaii is one of 2 states in the country that does not allow concealed carry. And with possibility of terrorism going on, when are we going to get concealed carry, and why is it such a big problem? 48 states have no problem with it. Why does Hawaii?
I think, is that an HPD question? Yes. Or is that a political question? No, it's both.
Yes,
it's
because
HPD.
it's up to their boss.
You guys, I guess, have the option to offer permits to some individuals, but evidently there have never been any permits given except for maybe existing officers?
Yes, that's
Is that
my
the case?
understanding on it, yes. As far as the why Hawaii doesn't have a concealed carry, I'm sorry, sir, I can't answer that. That's beyond my area.
I know it's up to your boss.
Yes.
But you having polio, I can see where you want to stay in place. You're not going to be running around in part.
I can't run away.
And I know he's an NRA gun instructor at the shooting range. Yes, please.
So I have 2, obviously, military, move around a lot. I am concealed handgun license and permit in Texas. Came here, same thing. So what I do, and this is just my thing, I cannot carry a gun concealed in Hawaii. When I go to places, especially bigger malls or anything like that, I look for obviously where I can escape from. I know they talked about in the video the guy looking for weapons and places to escape during the time of the incident, but everywhere I go, I look for a place to escape and then what I can use for a weapon. So to help you egress and save yourself your survivability, that's what I do, and that's what I've kind of come to terms with here is I figure out what I can use to protect myself and my family when I go into those spots.
So there's no reciprocal. If you can carry it in Texas, that doesn't mean that we honor it here in Hawaii.
Yeah, it's just for the states. I know like Florida, Texas kind of intertwined, but yeah.
Any other comments? Otherwise, I want you to know that this is sponsored by my office. That means there's been a lot of people involved in doing this, and I want to sort of cite them and give them a round of applause, starting with, let me introduce them by Chief of Staff, Tyler Humphreys. All of the videos and the slides have been Shannon Nash and Rachel Lee. Put your hands up, Rachel. And the chief material and kind of, I guess you'd call it the host of this whole event, and we're going to give him a lay, is Mr. Garvin Chan. Garvin, thank you. Stand up, Garvin. We're going to give you a lay, or Rachel's on the process of getting you a lay. Garvin, please step forward to get a lay. They want to get you on camera. While he's coming up here, Garvin has probably researched all the material that you saw in the resource section. Let's give him a round of applause. Garvin, well done. I even saw you were shaking hands with a lot of you when you came. Also, I saw that, Darrick, you were shaking hands, and some of the other. You guys running for office or what? No, that's good. Good. This concludes the first ever counterterrorism workshop or forum. It's a chance to raise our awareness, to be what I would like to say is kind of a corny but a real slogan. Don't be scared, be prepared. Thank you for coming, and aloha.